In our sixth session of the Ohio State University Nighsonger Center ECHO on improving services and supports for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and mental health conditions, we'll be hearing from Erin Harris, a senior clinical social work manager at the Nighsonger Center, who will be providing us with a lesson on using Charting the Life course to inform treatment planning and navigation. In today's session, we would like participants to be able to identify processes to use Charting the Life course resources to both understand the long-term goals of adults with intellectual disability and their families, and to guide treatment planning and linkage, as well as to understand how to integrate participant cultural variables into the process. At this time, I'd like to welcome our own Erin Harris to the stage. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you. All right, can you guys see my presentation okay? Yes, okay. All right. Before I jump in, if you guys could in the chat, let me know if Charting the Life course is completely new to you. If it is not completely new to you, let me know if you feel super confident, not confident, intro, all that kind of stuff. And I gotta pull the chat up over here so I can actually see it. Okay. One person says they've used it. Okay. Just gonna give it a second here. Okay, for those of you that have used it, as I go through some of this stuff, I'm going to zoom through some things. But if there's something that you're like, oh, I really want to talk more about this tool, or I want to think about it in this way, stop me or put it in the chat and let me know. And then we can kind of talk more about that. Because we could talk about charting the life course all day. So I don't want to, you know, only want to go over what you guys want to go over. Okay, so moving forward. All right, so Charting the Life course is a tool developed by Charting the Life course Nexus, lifecoursetools.com, housed in University of Missouri, Kansas City, at their USAID. You already know who I am. We already talked about our outcomes. So let's jump right in. Okay. As a review, Charting the Life course is not just a set of tools. It is really a way, a framework to kind of think about how individuals and families of all abilities, so everyone, not just those with disabilities, can develop a vision for a good life and think about what they need to know and do and identify how to get there. So we're going to go over a little bit about the framework and then dive into some tools and thinking about how we can use those tools to guide treatment, and, you know, figure out how to navigate our crazy world of, well, just our crazy world. Okay, so guiding principles. I'll go in these a little bit more detailed, but here's a list: all people, family system cycles, life stages and trajectory, life outcomes, life domains, 3 buckets, integrated support star, and policy and systems. So we're going to talk briefly about all of those things. So you have the person, right? Got your little person there. And you have the person in the context of family and community. I think kind of our theme through all of this echo has talked about being person-centered, family-centered, community-centered. How do we kind of think about supports in that context? So I don't think that's a new concept for us here. But then with Charting the Life course, you're thinking about that person and that family within the context of different life domains. So we've got daily life and employment, social spirituality, safety and security, community living, healthy living, citizenship, and advocacy. So thinking about all those different parts of a person's life And how are we going to navigate that? How are we going to think about those things? How are we going to prioritize which area of life we want to focus on for, whatever period of life we are in? Then you have 3 buckets of support that everybody needs. So connecting and networking, goods and services, discovery and navigating. I don't have a ton to say about that. This is kind of the part that I find most helpful are the support star. So we've broken down which area of life we want to talk about, right? So if we're using the star with an individual or a family, and we've determined, okay, we really need to talk about healthy living. Well, now we're going to focus on how are we going to focus on healthy living? And that's when we have the support star. So we're going to look at all these different areas of our supports. We're not just going to look at our eligibility specific resources. So that's going to be something like the County Board of Developmental Disabilities. That's eligibility specific. We're not just going to think about, well, what other community resources are there? We're going to include resources like relationships, our family, our neighbors. We're going to figure out who are those people that are going to help support us with all of these other things. What technology are we going to use? Can you guys see this top blue part, or is my screen covering it up for you?
We can see it. It says
You can see it. Okay, perfect. Personal strengths and assets. It's on my side, it's blocked. So I wanted to make sure you guys could see it. So then that top part is what are within myself, what strengths do I bring to supporting myself or to supporting myself within any of these other areas? And then the last main big part of charting the life course is really thinking about all of these things across the lifespan. So I know folks that use charting the life course and the framework in our very early stages and early development, early education, through school age. Our IEPs at school are starting to bring in using charting the life course all the way up through adulthood and older adulthood. Any questions so far? That was my very, very brief overview. No, okay. All right. So this is kind of the list of how I have personally used charting the life course within my treatment of folks. So I am mostly doing individual counseling, as well as doing some college age kind of supports around navigating college. So things that I have used it for: rapport building, building insight and advocacy skills, assessment of insight and family supports, figuring out what are some challenges or areas of need, as well as strengths, goal setting, providing feedback, and prioritizing goals and next steps. For me, in clinic, which I think my next slide talks about, in clinic, so in our Neissanger transition age diagnostic clinic, we really use this framework to help families figure out how to prioritize their next steps. So in our clinic, we do 2 days of assessing with some psychology assessments and just some interview kind of questions. And then we have a huge document that's like 10 pages long of feedback and results, and it's super overwhelming. It's not a document I want to hand to anybody because it's just too much, right? But one of the things that we do is we think about, for each individual person we are doing an assessment on, we think about from their perspective or whatever their need is at that time, how are they going to receive this feedback? So are they someone who I can just hand them this paper and they're going to know, or am I gonna maybe going to need to think about using the integrated support star to kind of break down different things we're recommending, to help them categorize them, to help them think through, okay, what is the priority right now? Is my priority on that health, health, healthy living, or is my priority right now focused on finding a place to live independently? If I have that conversation with them, then I'm going to know how do I guide them to navigate their next steps, right? My recommendations aren't going to change, but how I deliver those recommendations are going to change and make them a little bit more accessible to the individual person that I'm working with. To go back a slide, thinking about kind of planning treatment or planning services, using the trajectory or the vision tool, which I have examples of those later, so you actually get to see what those look like. But the trajectory tool basically is, what does a good life look like? And what does a good life not look like? And using that to get to know the person you're working with, get to know what their insight is about what they want a good life to look like. And that can kind of help start to guide some of that treatment planning to really be person-centered and focused on what do they want to improve on. I think a lot of times, especially working with transition age folks or school age folks, you're going to get that perspective from a parent and not necessarily from the child. And so this is actually something that we do at the Nighsonger Center at Aspirations, is we have the participant, so the child or young adult, fill out a tool, and then we have the parent or caregiver fill out the same tool to kind of serve as a conversation starter between families, right? So is there discrepancy in those different results? So if you had, a child talk about what's a good life look like and a parent's looks completely different, well, then you can have a conversation about that. You can figure out, okay, do we need to focus on goals just for parents? Is that the priority? And maybe help the kids see that that's the priority? Or is it the opposite? Maybe a parent had no idea that their child wanted to start thinking about their future job and their career. So just, again, kind of using them as conversation starters, using them to kind of really get to know the actual person rather than, maybe parents' perspective. I'm not going to read through these examples. You guys will have access to these slides. You can read them if you would like. But now I'm going to get into a couple examples so that you can really start to think about how you might want to use this. This is an example of Barry. I also want to note this is titled one page profile. Charting a Life Course does not like to use the term profile any longer because they got some feedback from individuals that it's not a great term. And so this is what we've moved to one page person-centered description. So this is Barry. This is a little bit about what others like and admire about Barry. This tool, I believe, was used to share with care provider teams as just kind of a quick, short, here's Barry, here's here's what's important to me, here's how to best support me. So every one-page description has those three categories. what others like and admire about me. This is kind of thinking about our strengths. And then what's important to me and how to best support me can be written towards specific things, right? So Barry says family is important to him. He is doesn't get to visit his son very much, who lives in New Zealand, but he really enjoys knowing what's going on in his life. Appearance is really important to him, so looking, clean cut and tidy, enjoying going to the garden and feeding the birds, one of his favorite things, and being outdoors in general. So those are things that are important to him. That would be important for a care provider to know who's maybe helping him plan his day. Maybe he needs to make sure he can get rides to get out to the garden, making sure that he has laundry accessible to him. And if he isn't able to do his laundry, how can someone make sure he can do that, right? This might look different if this one-page profile was used maybe for an emergency room or a hospital visit, something like that. So what's important to me might say something like, it's important to me that I have my comfy sweatshirt all the time, or it's important with me that I have visitors at least once a day. So if you kind of think about this tool as being customized to whatever it is you're using it for, it could be real general, just for anybody working with someone, but it also could be specific to, maybe employment. It could be specific to roommates. It could be specific to, like I said, more medical care. And then the how to best support me section is thinking about really how to support me, but how do you like to be supported? So Barry responds better to male carers. That's really important to know when getting a provider. To be aware if he is feeling frightened or confused, he can become agitated or distressed. What really helps is chatting to him about Brenda, Sonia, and Simon. So kind of thinking about coping strategies. Those are good things to put in how to best support me. Really any kind of communication need can go in this section. As well as, so thinking about this last bullet point. So know that Barry should have a drink nearby at all times. A jug of juice on his bedside table at night works well. Might be some even more like specific healthcare related things. So maybe he needs to stay well hydrated because it affects a medication he's taking. Those are good things to put in here too. These are not meant to be like all-consuming care lists. That needs to maybe be in another spot, but if there's maybe something important that is more a preference of how those things work, this is a good tool to use. All right, I need to move you guys out of the way so I know how much time I have. There. Ben's good life vision. I just really like this example because I think Ben's tattoos are cool. And I think it's great that Ben has the support in his life to get tattoos. So Ben's good life is in this purple cloud up here. Things that he does not want in his life are going to be down here. So this is really helpful. This is a helpful tool for things like goal setting. These are helpful. This is a helpful tool to really think about like a transition planning. So what's next in our life? We need to know what we want in life before we figure out what supports we need to get there. And I think, again, this is another good one to do if you're working with either someone who is a child or adolescent, or maybe somebody who is not their own guardian to compare. So have them do it, or have them have a conversation about it, and then have a caregiver do it. And really thinking about making sure that those views align. And if they don't align, how do we, prioritize what is most important to having a good life? Compromising. Any questions about those two tools yet? So the one-page description or the good life vision? Or if anybody has examples that they've used, feel free to throw that in the chat too, and we can talk about those. There's a little bit more about life domains, just to kind of give you to see those a little more up close. I'm not going to read them. And then I think this is where we'll stop. So all of these tools are available. I'm not going to I didn't go over all of the tools that exist. So if you want to look at them more, we can put that in the chat, thelifecoursetools.com. But while I go over this, if you guys think of questions, put that in the chat as well. Okay, so the integrated support star, this was where it broke down kind of the 5 different areas of supports in someone's life. So personal strengths and assets, listing our strengths, listing our assets, listing our skills. This is also a great communication tool to share with a new team member, or even to share, like, I don't know, if you're starting a new job, helpful to use. Relationships, breaking down families, friends, acquaintances. Who are those people? And if those people change, making sure that we know, oh, I have a new, really close friend that's been helpful over the last couple months. Technology, anything from, personal technology, a phone, TV, a tablet, those kinds of things, to our assistive technology or environmental technology. So thinking about what adaptive equipment maybe do they have in their home? Do they have remote support that they're using? Do they have, or if they don't, maybe that's something they could start using. Do they have some low-tech devices that help them with their day-to-day tasks? Really thinking through, do they have them? And if they don't, is this an area to explore? Excuse me. Community resources. I think this might be an area to think about too, specific to culture. I know I haven't really touched on the cultural component here, but the nature of being person-centered really should always encompass culture as well. But thinking about, are there cultural spaces in their community that either maybe they haven't explored, or maybe they do explore a lot? Are they accessing all of their faith-based communities that, if they are, if faith is important in their life? Eligibility specific supports. I'm not really going to talk much about this because I think we all know a lot about this. This is kind of tends to be the focus of people with disabilities. So I think I'm gonna stop there. Here are some of the other tools to kind of just show you, and then I'll open up for questions.
Thank you, Aaron. I'd like to invite members of the community to ask any questions at this time. You can raise your hand or unmute yourself. Feel free to use the chat as well. Alternatively, I see that some of you do have some experience using this tool in your own context. So if you'd like to share a story or an example of how you use specific component of the tool with individuals that you're working with, that would be welcome too.
I can share another example too, if we want one more example. It's more of a fun example. All right, I'm going to share it because I'm not seeing anything. So this is not necessarily mental health or disability related, but an example of how these tools and this framework is for all. Something that we are requiring on our team within NYSAR, our LIDS department, we have required everybody to complete a one-page description. One for the students that we work with, so that the students that we're working with know a little bit more about us. But then also I've kind of written mine as a tool for the workplace. So if you are working with me on a team, what are my strengths and what works, how can you best support me and how can I, what is important in a team? And we have those all posted on our doors of our office. And it's something that we're hoping helps, a little bit with team rapport and just that culture of collaboration, but also the students that we're working with who have disabilities, making things a little bit more accessible in terms of how do we communicate, and what might be helpful for them to know.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that example, Aaron. I was actually going to bring that up. I think it's a great way not only to familiarize yourself as a professional with the tool, getting to think about how you might use it to interact with someone that you're working with, but provides a nice model that you can share with someone. Goes great with that. One of those initial things that you said was a great benefit of this tool is simply building rapport and developing relationship with people. Talking about preferences and interests and support needs can be really valuable, and this is a nice way to guide that process. I'll pause again.
Also,
Yeah,
that
go
it's
ahead.
visual. Sorry. It's a great visual tool, which a lot of our folks need.
Yeah, that's right. Right, as a graphic organizer, it's really nice and directive, chunking out different areas and domains and being able to focus on one thing at a time. I see a few hands raised. Andrea?
Yeah, thanks, Erin. I love the Charting the Life course materials. And yeah, I think your examples are fabulous. I also was talking to them about a friend who was trying to help her college seeking child on an IEP figure out what they wanted to do. And I sent them back to the Charting the Life course materials again, which kind of leads me to my next question, because I'm wondering if you have some folks that are maybe not as receptive when you pull out the physical tool in front, like, are they feel like, oh, that's not for me, that's I'm above that. And are there tool, or is everyone pretty open to it? And I'm just wondering if there's things that you've used to kind of build rapport to start working on Charting the Life course if you have someone who's not really into it.
So generally how I introduce any of the tools are, hey, I have this tool. It could be helpful just for us to have a conversation, or it could be helpful for us to actually fill it out and you can take it with you. So I always give that option, and really help them think about how can this be helpful. Even if you do think it's silly or not going to be helpful, how can we use it in a helpful way? So I usually introduce them that way. That way I don't get that pushback. Um, I think the pushback that I have received ever is more about I don't want to do the writing, right? It's not necessarily the tool itself, but it's the act of writing something out or the act of putting it into sentences. Um, and those are easy fixes. Those are, well, let's just talk about it. We're all right for you. Or we can do pictures, or we can do bullet points, that kind of stuff.
Nazra?
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. So I just wanted to add, and thank you so much. Your presentation was excellent, and thank you for the examples that you gave. I just wanted to add, as a sociologist, we use, and in our organization, we use the life goals as a way of looking at people's lives at different points in times and contexts and relationships. And we are looking at people's lives in refugee camps, for example, and how that affects their life here when they come to the US. What kinds of, social structures support or, prohibit their abilities to get, assimilated or acculturated. What are some historical contexts, even before the refugee camp and also in the refugee camp, and how can we help them form useful relationships, whether it's people with disabilities or people without. And now that we have a lot more people who are dealing with difficult situations of children who are living with disabilities, whether developmental or other, educational and intellectual. And so how can we help them form relationships of support and, to continue their life, to improve their lives? Thank you.
That's great. And that's what I mean, I love that it really is when they say for all, it is for all. It was developed with disability in mind, but it's definitely not exclusive to that.
Pause for just another moment to see if anyone else would like to share a specific story or how they utilize this tool. I want to re-emphasize how many moving parts and pieces there are, and I want to recognize that they're, even as we look at that graphic of the individual in the center, and as it grows into the family and the community and the domains and areas out to the integrated supports, it can feel overwhelming. And I know someone in the chat mentioned, I just want to be able to start using this tool. And I want to echo something that Erin had mentioned early on about just identifying one domain of a person's life that they wanted to prioritize and focus on, whether it be healthy living, perhaps, or employment, and then moving out to those supports and moving around and identifying those most applicable elements that could be helpful in identifying, say, technology tools that could support a person's healthy living or transition to an employment setting, and just kind of taking small bits and pieces of the tools and worksheets that are available just to get started. Erin, any other strategies that you would like to share?
Yeah, I wanted to pull up the website just so you guys can see, because I'm a Charting Life Course ambassador, and I went through it's like multi-week training, and I still didn't know where to start. So it is kind of overwhelming, and it's gonna feel that way until you get familiar with the tools. But the library has it breaks things down. So gives you like foundational tools, If you are someone who, you really want to focus on figuring out resources, you can click on the star. If you are, specifically looking for healthy living or supported decision making, like it kind of will break down the tools and give you suggestions of where to start. Or like there's like a whole transition planning guide. I thought it was under this one, but where it'll break down different things, different tools that might be helpful for that specific area of life. So I would just suggest exploring the website, exploring the tools, and learning a little bit more about those. We also run trainings pretty regularly through the Family Resource Network of Ohio on how to use these. So if you go to FRNO's website, you can kind of look at their training schedule, and I do believe they are free. And I do believe SSAs can get education credits for them.
And could you
Yep.
re-share the worksheet that you were speaking about that we've had our own staff complete and post on the doors of our offices so people can get to know us? I think that's a nice way to start familiarizing yourself with it, by completing one of the worksheets yourself.
So that's the one page profile. Let's see. I'll pull up mine really quick if I can find it really quick. That'll be the question. Can I find it really quick?
Or no worries. Yeah, I didn't want to go the college spot, but that would be great to see a model. Also give us a quick pause to see if anyone else would like to chime in. And then as we transition here to our next phase of the presentation into our case study, I'll encourage everybody to turn your cameras on so that we can engage in that discussion with each other. And trying to buy some time here for Aaron. Great. There we go.
So it's not filled out, but this is the one that you'll find on the website. Breaks it down into one page, spot for a picture. Yeah. Nope, not that. Sorry.
Yeah, that's really great though, right? Because it kind of it starts with this big picture of who I am and what's important to me, and then moves down to the bottom with how to best support me. So it gets into those supports and accommodations that can really help you get to know one another and how to be helpful.
There it is.
The model.
This one's mine completed.
Okay, everyone, she's open to critical feedback.
I sure
got
am.
the constructive criticism?
Feel free to email me.
But also a good sense of humor, right? Funny and kind. Work and self-care is what's important to you. And ideas about supporting you, reminders, helpful for all of us. Right. Immediate feedback, right? That's a best practice in all educational settings, to quickly provide that feedback so people can respond to it quickly while it's fresh. That's great. Thanks for that model, Aaron.
No problem.
All right. So we will transition here